Welcome to the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by Jaggi Gill, CEO of Apyron. Also joining us is my Water Tower Research equity research colleague, Robert Sassoon. Apyron is an innovative medtech company focused on developing and commercializing patient-centered neurostimulation technologies to provide relief from chronic pain, an all too prevalent affliction affecting millions of people. So, without further ado, let me welcome our guest to the podcast today.
Good to be here.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Robert.
So, Jaggi, before I hand it over to Robert for several questions, let me start by asking you just to give us a 30,000-foot overview of the firm and its business model, please.
Yes, of course. So, we have thought about some of the greatest challenges in healthcare today, and it focuses on pain and specifically chronic pain of the back and chronic pain of the joints. And as you think about the aging population and the growth of and the prevalence of arthritis, this problem's not going to go away. So we went about a path to develop a very safe, non-invasive therapy that the patient has agency over, that addresses specifically their chronic pain, but equally importantly, allows them to continue and regain, a very active, mobile lifestyle.
That's great. I would agree with you that the aging demographics around the globe are definitely a wind in your sails. Additionally, would you be kind enough to give us just a quick flyby of your professional background?
Yes, of course. So I started my career in academic medicine at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. I was assistant professor of neurology. And I'll say, I saw and was really influenced by two major things there that have an impact today. One is this sense of innovation and curiosity in terms of how do you continually improve healthcare for patients. And the second, foundation of the needs of the patient comes first. And that's been central to other things I've done, but I think has a great imprint on what we're trying to do at Apyron. After Mayo, I joined Boston Scientific. This was in around 2000. And I was fortunate to be part of a business development team that was very active in looking at technologies to put into the sales bag of Boston Scientific as it was growing and expanding outside of cardiology. I was a member of the team that did the acquisition of Advanced Bionics. This was the first foray into neurostimulation and pain management. And I was fortunate also to be involved in the operations team of Advanced Bionics. And that really got me exposed to just the energy of a startup, the innovation. And, I caught the bug of entrepreneurship really through those experiences. And from that, I started one of my first companies. It's called OrthoCore. And it used magnetic field stimulation, again, to address pain. In this case, it was joint pain specific to arthritis of the knee and the shoulder. It's a wearable. And we were, again, fortunate to build that and grow sales and acquired by Cirrus Corporation. And then staying on the same theme of how do you manage pain, I was the founder and ran 10x Health. 10x Health is a company that's pioneering, even till today, instrumentation that addresses tendon pain. So Tim and Robert, if you have tennis elbow or plantar fascia or Achilles tendinosis, these are overuse injuries typically. Historically, you would be treated with a surgery to remove the pain-generating tendon tissue. We developed an instrument that can do this in an outpatient setting, in an office setting, and used image guidance to give that safety and precision. So those all have, the common threads, if you will, we've always thought about building companies that are patient-centric and addressing, as I said in the preamble, a pain management challenge that many of us face.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That's, to state the obvious, very relevant background for your current role. So thanks. Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Tim and Jagi. It's great to have you on this podcast. But before we dive into Apyron and its technology, let's start with the bigger picture, the actual market that you're servicing, the chronic pain market. So maybe you can start by giving us an overview of its size, the current treatment landscape, and the specific segments that Apyron is focused on, and importantly, why those segments are so critical.
Right. So Robert, as you might know, there's about 1 in 5 of us walking around in the US. So I'll focus on US, and these numbers are mirrored outside the US. But about 1 in 5 of us in the US suffer from chronic low back pain. And in most of these cases, treatment with over-the-counter medicine, short-term prescription medicine, physical therapy, injections such as steroids, all of those work either by themselves or in combination for most of those, 1 in 5. And that's about 68 million people in the US. If you go a level below that, Robert, about half of those people, around 35 million, the pain is so severe and it really has a disabling feature to it that they need to take many medications. And many times these medications are long-term use. They may have some consequences in terms of side effects. And so those people really have to balance the disability they have with the challenges of taking multiple medications just to manage their pain, right? So that's about 35 million. Of that 35 million, 2/3, or around 24 million, have what's called intractable pain. And that describes a condition, again, of the 24 million in the US. You're not responding to medicine anymore, or it's just not taking the edge off that it used to. Now it starts to impact on you missing work. Now it starts to impact significantly on you losing the activity of daily living. And that obviously bleeds into sleep and mental health. So those 24 million people are really looking for a solution. And they fit into this overall trend, Robert, of people not wanting necessarily or preferentially to choose medical management or pharma because of the side effects, because of the addictive potentials that you think about, specifically around opiates. So that 24 million people that have this intractable pain, that are looking for a solution that has a safety profile, are really those patients that we choose to serve.
That's a pretty painful choice, if you excuse the pun.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, so you've talked about the market. So let's turn to your core product, a neurostimulation system for chronic pain. So today, patients, as you mentioned already, have access to a wide range of treatments, mainly, as you say, pharmacological therapies like opioids and non-opioids. There's nerve blocker injections, ablation procedures. Then there's a more traditional physical therapy, psychological and behavioral approaches, holistic options such as acupuncture, and of course, neurostimulation. So, in Apyron's case, what led you to choose neurostimulation as the path forward for this indication?
Yeah, thank you. And it goes back to what we discussed in the beginning. It's a very patient-centric, I guess, framework, Robert. So you think about someone who's got the burden of chronic pain. Not only does it significantly disrupt your physical well-being, but it bleeds over into your emotional well-being. It bleeds over into you not having a full night's rest, so you don't have that, restorative potential anymore. So what we were thinking about is how do we develop a solution that addresses the pain in a very targeted way, but doesn't have any unintended consequences, for the other aspects. So as we were evaluating the various technologies, and I will say from my pedigree in neuro and neurostimulation, I always found it as a very precise and a clean way of delivering therapy. And here's what I mean by that. If you think about neurostimulation as a platform, you are providing electrical stimulation to nerves, and it can either be the spinal cord as a bundle of nerves or a targeted nerve or peripheral nerve. You're providing this electrical stimulation to provide a sensation that overwhelms or masks the sensation of pain. So, our brain can pick up the largest level of signal that comes in. And when you have chronic pain, it's just overwhelmed with the signal of pain. But the nerves carry other signals as well, not just pain. And the approach of neurostimulation is, well, can we stimulate those other nerve fibers that can dampen the pain signal or mask it? And that has been played out in over 20, 25 years of science, started in spinal cord stim and, more recently, over the last 10, 15 years has really progressed and evolved into peripheral nerve stim. So the science has a basis that if you can target the nerve, deliver these electrical impulses, you can address the severity of the patient, that the severity of the pain the patient has. But also equally importantly, there's not a lot of collateral sequelae. There's no side effects that you would have with medication. So the cleanness and the precision of that therapeutic approach of neurostimulation really was attractive for us.
Yeah. So there are a number of neurostimulation systems out there. So maybe you could now walk us through how your neurostimulation system works, why it works, its key features and benefits, and what sets it apart from other medical devices or neuromodulation solutions for chronic pain currently in the market.
That's right. And as you said, there are a number of them, specifically about peripheral nerve stimulation. There are about 2 or 3 others out there in the market today. And what we see is they've actually continued to embolden the therapeutic case that if you stimulate this peripheral nerves, and in the case of the low back pain, these are nerves in the lumbar or lower region. If you can stimulate those nerves, the patients do really well, Robert, and they tolerate the therapy and it's sustainable. So that's a great, starting point for us, right? So how do you make something that's specifically designed for this nerve that's patient friendly? So unlike a lot of our competitors, where they have a lead, and that lead has electrodes at the end that deliver this electrical impulse, that lead can be a number of centimeters long and needs to be buried into the skin. We've taken a different approach, and you may not be able to see this on the camera, but we have a paddle, and the paddle is about as long as a toothpick, and it's as thick as a penny. So on one side of the paddle, you have electrodes. And in our case, we have 14 electrodes. And that number allows us to cover a number of peripheral nerves. So you can recruit a number of nerves, but also allows us to differentially activate one electrode to another. So in the event that you don't get the right stimulation because the electrode's not right on top of the nerve, you can toggle to an electrode that is on top of that nerve. So it gives that optionality to the surgeon to deliver optimal therapy. So low profile and fully implanted circuitry and electrodes. So that's one difference. It's not a lead. It's a, self-encased paddle with electrodes on it. The second difference is that we wanted to uncouple the battery from the implant. If you're familiar with the spinal cord stimulation therapy and some other neurostim, the battery sometimes is connected to the lead that I talked about, and the battery is also placed in the body. The therapy works tremendously well, but that's another burden of having another piece of hardware in the body. We have come across some innovation where we can uncouple the battery, and the battery is a wearable. And again, it speaks to the agency that we're delivering to the patient. That wearable is in the form of a pendant. That energy within that pendant is in the battery, and the radio frequency transmission will be able to wirelessly recharge the implant. So that, again, provides a mobility. The patient doesn't have to be locked in to recharge. They can consume and go on with their day at a very high mobile level. The third and final piece is, again, staying patient-centric, is an application on their phone. That application on their phone, the smartphone, allows that patient to throttle the stimulation parameters up within bounds in the days that maybe the pain's a little bit more severe. So again, gives that ownership to the patient. And it also gives information in terms of the battery level, so if they need to recharge it. So again, the trinity, if I can use it that way, is we have a low profile implant. We have uncoupled the battery, and the battery's outside in a wearable. And the third is this smartphone application that gives information to the patient.
Fascinating. So where does the technology currently stand on its path to commercialization, and what are the key next steps to bring it to the market?
Yeah. So right now we are in the product development phase, which is called design freeze. That's a fairly progressed phase. And that design freeze will allow us to refine our manufacturing plan as we prepare for commercialization. We have plans to submit our 510K application. This is a 510K pathway from an FDA regulation. So we'll plan to submit that by the end of 2026. And we'll spend the most of next calendar year, preparing for a commercial launch in early 2027. It'll be a US focused launch.
Okay, so taking that a step further, um, once the device is cleared by the FDA, what will your go-to-market strategy look like?
Yeah, I love this question. I really have probably enjoyed, of all things, how to build clinical currency, how to build a commercial team, and really bring therapy to this underserved market. So that part of the evolution of the company is probably my favorite. And to answer your question specifically, one of the things we have done, we will continue to do as we move into 26, is build our clinical champions. As you and Tim know, when you're launching a product, you need to have a number of physicians, surgeons, that cohort who can speak about the therapy, the features and benefits, as you say, but also they will help us short term in refining our procedure. Yes, it's safe and it's image guided, but as you know, there's so many variables. So how do you want to make that procedure reproducible? This is where our clinical champions come in to say, this is how it'll be most reproducible and with the ease of adoption. So number one, building our clinical champion base. Number two, one of the things we need to be thoughtful about is how do we make the product and the solution aware at the patient level? How do you build patient awareness? There's a number of advocacy groups of people that suffer from this intractable chronic low back pain. So we want to bring them into the fold. We want them to be a part of the journey of bringing this therapy to market. So there'll be some direct pre-market development. And obviously, once we launch, so having them involved as a target for consumer awareness, patient awareness. And finally, it's never too early to start thinking about building an independent distributor sales force. So tactically, we will launch the product through a distributed sales force that's independent from a FTE base or a company base. The sales force model, Robert will be consumed of heads of commercialization that are part of the leadership team of the company. We will also have clinical support specialists that'll be on the part of the team of the company. They will be involved in training our surgeons as well as training our independent distributed sales force. The actual execution of sales we'll pick a number of cities. As no surprise to you, you typically think about the 32 NFL cities, National Football League cities, about pursuing a limited market release in those areas.
Yeah, I was actually talking recently to a CEO of another medical device company, not in the same area as you, but he said the commercialization strategy that is the most cost effective and potentially most successful is one where there's referrals within amongst the customers themselves. So I think you mentioned that in this answer. So
that's right.
Final question from me though: what do you see as the market opportunity for Apyron in the chronic pain segments you are targeting?
Yeah. So when you think about our kind of projections, and even if you get to within the next handful of years to 50 million of revenue, and that's achievable because you have established reimbursement, you have a very engaged customer base. And when I speak about customer, it's the patient population, it's the physicians. And in here, the physicians are a blend of interventional pain docs, spine surgeons, neurosurgeons, and then also the payers. This is a very cost-effective way to deliver pain management. So you have a very engaged and motivated customer base, customer in the broad sense. But to get to 50 million with all of those attributes is very achievable. And to do that, you would still be less than 0.05% of the market penetration. So those numbers really speak to the size and the burden of the unmet need. And I'll give you an example that was recently, I think, seen as an example of this. Nalu, which is a peripheral nerve stimulation company, has some very compelling technology, has done very well in terms of delivering the clinical equipoise. This year in 2025, they will approach 60 million in revenue, maybe more, but around those levels. In October of this year, they were acquired by Boston Scientific for over 530 million, thereabouts. So it speaks to the interest in this market, the growth in this market, the ability to use this technology as a platform to go after other applications of pain management. And, we have the similar approach. We believe our implant is smaller, speak to the patient advocacy and agency, but nevertheless, I think the end results are still within our grasp.
Sounds very interesting. I'll leave it there, and thank you, Jaggi, for explaining Apyron's novel solution to address a pretty debilitating problem that affects many millions of lives. And I'll hand it back to Tim.
Thanks, Jaggi and Robert. And I would just say, kind of in passing, I won't bore you with why I have this knowledge base, but I have a pretty deep knowledge base on spinal issues and pain. And I would submit to you as I listen to this, I think it's fascinating that you also have another target audience, and those are major corporations, because the number of lost days just in the United States alone, the numbers are mind-bending. It's in the billions and billions of dollars of lost productivity from employees calling in with back pain. So I think you're onto something very exciting here. So thank you for your time and best wishes on the launch.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Robert, for the opportunity here to be on your platform.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.